Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here tonight. We've got a good-sized group here at the Civic Center in Lone Tree, and equally, we have a good-sized group that's been showing up here, clicking into Zoom. In fact, tonight we also have our presenter, Russell Klimas, who's going to be, there you go, presenting over Zoom. He's down in Southern Colorado and wasn't able to make it up tonight, but we're glad that you're able to connect with us via Zoom. So we'll get started on that here in a few minutes. I just want to go over a couple of other things that we have going on. First of all, I would just, again, wanted to thank Russell for joining us. I know this will be a fun meeting in that he's got a very creative style, produces some amazing images through the use of light painting, and then he's also got a lot of other techniques that he uses. Other upcoming events that we've got September 4th is a exhibition night. For those that haven't participated in those, it's a great learning opportunity. Submit up to 4 images. They don't have to be mixed color, black and white. You can put either or both in for those. And when we do those, we'll bring the images up on the screen, up on the projector TV, I guess in this case, and everybody, and you get to say a few words about what you were thinking, why you took the image, what it means to you, if there's any special techniques that you used in processing, and then we just open it up to the audience to weigh in, give constructive feedback, and oftentimes congratulate you on your amazing images. So that again will be September 4th. And then on September 18th, we have the next presentation night. That one is on color theory, and that's with Trish Sangello. And October 2nd is our next competition. That is going to be a theme night. Again, as you remember, the last competition that we had, and I'll be giving awards out here shortly, but that one was open. This one is themed, so your images should be on the themes of light painting. So let's make sure we pay attention to tonight's presentation, or macro. You can also submit in the macro category. October 2nd, and on light painting. And I believe Russell, our guest tonight, is our judge for that event. So looking forward to having him judge something that he specializes in. I just want to make a couple of quick introductions about Russell. He's been a photographer for 7 years, so relatively short period of time, and was inspired by scenery that Colorado has to offer. His photography really took off and became noticed when he discovered the style of light painting that was introduced by Eric Perret. I don't know if anybody has seen those, but he does some really amazing. He uses like wand techniques, and I've actually been in a workshop that a short workshop that Russell did for PPC a couple of years ago at our conference, and I learned those techniques myself. I just need to do it a little bit more often. So maybe tonight will inspire me to go out and actually do a little bit more of that. Since then, he's become more passionate about his creative style of photography, often pushing the possibilities and breaking the mold of what people think is not possible. A side note on that is he's also going to be one of the instructors at the Professional Photographers of Colorado's conference in November, where he's going to provide a 3-hour presentation on the use of artificial intelligence in the processing of portraits and other images. So with that, I'll open it up to if anybody else has any questions. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and give out some of the awards. Okay. These awards are from the last image competition that we had, and this was, let's see, make sure I've got all the right ones. So I'm going to start off with the beginner intermediate color. We've got Judges Award, and that goes to Carolyn Ryman for Hippo House Decoration. Congratulations. Let's see, first place, also Carolyn Ryman, same image, Hippo House Decoration. Good job. Second place, we have Bruce Ryman with Scoot Over. Third place, Bruce Ryman with Trace Ibis. Sorry about that. Let's see the and we have honorable mention, and this comes actually from not the same family, but Gary Danis with Route 66 Throwback Nights. Now we go on to beginner this to go advanced color, same order that we usually do the images. Advanced color, we've got first, or actual judges award goes to Jeff Woodward with Ray of Light. First place is Peter Rondinone with Dark and Moody. Second place, also Peter Rondinone with Mystic Forest. And third place, we have Carino Zaragoza, who's here tonight, with Precision Sandhill Team. Sure, there you go. Okay, honorable mention, Jane Richards with Family Refreshment. Now let's go to beginner, intermediate, black and white. Judges Award is Bruce Ryman, How About a Swim? First place, Carolyn Ryman, Are We Jumping? Second place, Tamara Ripley, No More Room. Third place, we have Carolyn Ryman, Me and My Shadow. The Rymans are cleaning up here because here's one more. Honorable mention, Bruce Ryman, How About a Swim? Advanced black and white. So this will be the last category that we have. So let's see these in different order. Let's go back to Judges Award. This is Jeff Woodward with First Light. First place, Jane Richards, What's Your Problem? Second place, Peter Rondinone with Vesterhorn. Third place, Carino Zaragoza, Day at the Park. Honorable mention, Susan Longer with On a Mission. Congratulations, everybody, for the awards. Like I said, we got October is our next competition, and that one is, as we already mentioned, that will be light painting and macro as the themes. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to our guest speaker, Russell Klimas.
Okay, cool. So I don't know what experience people have with light painting. If you want to, say in the chat if you have experience or not, or raise your hand in the room, that'd be cool. But basically, we're gonna be going over from top to bottom, like if you're a very beginner, you don't know anything, into some really advanced stuff. And so we're gonna just kind of dive into it, and I'm gonna explain it as simple as I can because I know that's the way that I work best. So if you don't know what light painting is, it's generally a long exposure. Most commonly, people have seen car trails or like airplane trails, and that is what a lot of people are exposed to, all puns intended, when we think of light painting for very basic stuff. Now, this is what I focus on, is a lot more on portraits and using specific tools in order to create stuff that I think looks really cool. And so you get some kind of effects like these. And we'll go over on how to make this and how all of this was done and everything. So first, you're going to need three things generally. You're going to need a camera, you're going to need your tripod, and you're going to need some lights. Yeah, you kind of need all three for the most part. There's always exceptions to the rule, but we're not going to talk about those. If you have questions and stuff as I go, either throw them in the chat or you can interrupt me. I don't care. So first, a little history of light painting. So the first light paintings were done in 1889 by Etienne Jules Méret and Georges Demey. And this is when basically they attached light bulbs to the joint of an assistant. And it's called the pathological walk from the front. I think that is a very strange name, but do you. Another example is when Demey took a black stick with a white ball on it, and then with reflected sunlight wrote out his last name on a wall, and he kind of got that effect. So those were like the two official first light paintings that ever really came out. Just some important things to know when you get into light painting. It takes a lot of patience. There's a lot of trial and error, especially when you're really trying to nail things. And you got to visualize a lot of it in your mind. Light painting is easy to start, but if you really want to get like really, really like good looking light paintings, in my opinion, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of practice. And if you get one good shot, trust me, like it's worth it. And a lot of the times, especially when we're working with other people, we'll build in layers. So just like if you guys have done studio photography before, you always start with like one light at a time and make sure that one light looks good, and then you add the next. Light painting works the same way. And with the light painting community in general, we just like share everything that we know because we just want to grow it as much as we can, because light painting in itself, it's really hard to monetize. So it's one of those things that's like, let's just grow the community and learn techniques and stuff like that. In lieu of that, we kind of like give shout outs to where we learned stuff from or who we were inspired from, because that's all we really got. And contrary to popular belief, whenever you do light painting images, it's like so quiet. It's so quiet, and you don't need to be, unless you're trying to like do multiple light painters. And I just think it's really funny. It's always so quiet. So we're gonna go over some settings. Gonna talk about how a lot of them affect. I might have some text here that I forgot to change, but more or less your ISO, right? That's going to affect your light painting in certain ways. So with this is just a rough example, clearly done with an older sensor. Basically, your ISO is really good for depending on if your light source is really dim. So then you would want to crank the ISO if your f-stop's all the way at the bottom already. And that's going to help with certain tools. And then depending if you're outside or inside, that's also going to change. Your aperture range for light painting is going to vary depending on a couple things. One, how bright your flashlight is. If it's really bright, or if you're shooting fire, then you're going to be one at f11 or f8. But if it's not that bright, or you're trying to capture your environment or something like that, then you're going to want to be at 2.8 or below. Contrary to popular belief, with light painting, a lot of people will say that, like, what's your f-stop? My model always seems blurry in my light painting, and that's because your model moved or the camera got bumped. It's now because your f-stop. I shoot at f2.8 all the time. They come out clear, so it's generally because somebody moved. It is not because of the depth of field. So this is an example of when I had like an ISO of at 6400, I believe. And so then I had to make sure that the tube and the flashlight I was using was pretty dim. And I would make the circle first, and then I would hide behind the model so that we could expose for the Milky Way behind them. And that is how you would make something like this. So shutter speed with light painting is going to vary on a couple things depending on what you want to do. Most of the time I'm shooting in bulb because I have a remote trigger. Most cameras can go up to 30 seconds in a long exposure if you're doing like a timed. That can be good for a lot of things, but I like having the remote, which we will get to. Otherwise, if I am going to be doing like shutter drags or something, then you might be at like a 1 or 2 second exposure, whether it's you doing portraits or like fireworks. But oftentimes I just shoot in bulb. I just will trigger it manually to end my exposure. Some other settings that are involved when you are doing light painting, long exposure noise reduction, or NR, is something that's pretty common on cameras, and most of the time is actually turned on by default. When you're doing light paintings, if you're doing it right, you do not need long exposure NR on. It just takes longer to process, and basically, if your exposure was from 10 seconds, it will take 10 seconds to go through long exposure NR, and that's just too much time wasted, depending on if you're outside in the light or you just don't want to wait around. So I always recommend turning that off. Your white balance really kind of depends what you want to go for. I often have shot in auto and it's been fine. But if you want to really kind of have a neutral or want to go more cooler or warmer, that's something you should be aware of. And lastly, our focusing. A lot of the time, what we will do, there's two options. Either A, you put it to manual and then you focus manually on your subject and you just have somebody light them with a flashlight or a tube to get your focus. Or you can use autofocus while somebody's lighting them and then switch to manual so you don't lose focus. A lot of the time, whether it's in single shot or continuous, the camera's still going to try to look for something in the dark. So we need to use manual in order to avoid it hunting. If you don't have a camera, there are two options for your phone. For iPhone, you have the Photo Gear app and slow shutter. I prefer Photo Gear myself. Just because you can not only do photos, though the highlights do get a little blown out, but it can also do light painting video, which is really, really cool. And you also have slow shutter. I don't remember if that's free or not, but the Photo Gear one is. And those are two options on iPhone. When it comes to Android, it can really vary depending on the Android that you have. Whether it's 15 seconds to a minute, it really depends on whether it's a Google phone or like a Samsung or something like that. So that's going to be different depending on each individual phone for Androids.
Oh yeah, real quick. Going back to your the last slide. One of the points that you said you typically use is the long exposure noise reduction.
I do
Is
not.
Oh, you do not? Okay. Okay.
So this is using an Olympus camera, and this is in its live composite mode. It's the only camera that I know of that has this ability. I think Olympus and potentially Panasonic do, but it's really cool. So you can actually kind of see your light painting happening in pseudo real time on the back of the camera. So I was using a drone to make this, and I programmed out some different shots with the drone and some forced perspective to make that. So Olympus cameras can do that, and they're really good for either like teaching or if you are in a really bright environment because of the live composite mode. So when it comes to tripods, honestly, any tripod works. Obviously, the sturdier the tripod you have, the less apt for it to be bumped and get knocked over. I've used really crappy tripods I've gotten from Goodwill and really expensive ones. Honestly, all of them work. So yeah, just have one. Like I've used tables and chairs when I've done workshops and people don't have a tripod because people always forget. So, you adapt and you make it work. So these are the wireless triggers that I use. There are a few different options for wireless triggers, but I prefer these ones. They run for, I want to say, around 99 a piece. It could be 99 for two, but they're really good. You just want to make sure you have the right connector cable for your camera with them. Rugged. I've had one break on me in like 5 years. You can sync them up with other people's triggers as well if you want to. And they have like a 300-foot radius or like distance, I want to say. So they're really, really useful for light painting, especially because if I want to click it once to start it, and then I click it again to end it, so that way I can have two hands when I'm light painting instead of just one. So we have a couple different apps for if we want to use our phone for each of the different cameras that I know of. I've used the Sony's, and I think that's the only one that I've used app-wise, but these are another option if you don't have a wireless trigger. So we're going to get into flashlights now. And so this is the Nitcore MT222C. I know that this flashlight's no longer available, but just to give you an idea of the kinds of flashlights that you want to look for, the most important things that you can try to look for in a flashlight are adjustable brightness. So that's what like this style is here. So I can go from like, lumens of like 50 to lumens of 1,000. So it's really nice to have that ability. And then having a constant strobe. A lot of flashlights will have like an SOS or like a different setting. And if you want it to be symmetrical, you don't want that. If you want that, then great. But yeah, the adjustable brightness is really good for Milky Way stuff, and having a back button on and off is almost vital for buttons for tubes or blades or anything like that. But you can find similar ones from these two stores. So the Color Shine is a flashlight that's been around for a hot minute. It's not great. Okay, if you're on a budget and you want a color flashlight, I say go for it. Just don't drop it. If you drop it, it gets stuck on red. We don't like that. It does have a strobe mode, and it does have a rainbow mode. The rainbow mode, I've gotten some really nice stuff out of before. And it also eats through batteries pretty quick. So it's an option. Don't recommend it. We'll get to the one I recommend in a bit. We also have Fallamov 18650 flashlights. These are really small. You can get them at Light Painting store or on Amazon. And it has different brightness modes, which is great. And 960 lumens for like a flashlight that's really tiny is fantastic. And it has just a lot of the things that we're looking for in a budget flashlight. $35 is hella cheap for a flashlight for light painting. A lot of the times I spend like 70 to 80 bucks on a flashlight because I need that stuff. You got to be careful though, because this thing does get super hot, especially on a fresh battery. So if you're doing stuff in the cold, it's great. So this is the RGB Critter, okay? If I recommend any flashlight to anyone, it's this one. So I'm also an affiliate / sponsored with these guys. The fact that there's like a bazillion different color options, speed control, you can do constant strobe, sound reactive, movement reactive, and they just actually introduced with the new version of this flashlight a Bluetooth control that you can do on your phone. So before you had to like do it by like button mashing it or like knowing the button combo to get the secret thing that you need to do to get what you want. You don't have to do that anymore, and it's amazing. So I freaking love these things. I highly recommend it to anyone. They're really receptive, customer service and everything. They're just like, it's expensive, but so worth it. Here are some examples of some of the different tools that they have using the rainbow mode. And this was like with their, I want to say with their prototype. when I had it out first, and it's just like it comes out so good. I can't rave enough about how baller their flashlights are. So we're gonna get into kind of shooting and and procedures and how that works. So a lot of the time when I photograph with someone, light paint with someone, I always count down 3, 2, 1, and then we start our exposure just so the model knows, hey, don't move. If you're working in a group, then if you say shutter or open and then shutter or close when you're done, that just lets everybody know what's going on because you're in the dark, right? You can't see what's happening. And if we're doing a lot of stuff together, then we kind of state like, all right, I'm going, now you're going, now you're going. We end the exposure just so everybody's communicating, but we make the situation, the photo shoot easy for everyone. As with most things, it's easy to get caught up in what you're doing, especially, but like if you're outside and it's cold or it's hot or whatever, just keep checking in with the model, make sure that they're good, if they need water, whatever. If we didn't have our model, we wouldn't have a photo. So like they're numero uno, as far as I'm concerned. When you're shooting in a crowd, there's often limited tripod space. So either, shoot on different size lenses or find ways that we can work around together and just make everybody work. Oftentimes, if you have a wide angle and you're a lot closer, you can get some shots that other people wouldn't. And it comes out really cool. A lot of the times, if you're shooting like indoors or even outdoors, but especially indoors, and you both like a room and you both want to use it, but you don't want to expose into each other's images, we just kind of like we'll take turns on who's going when. And generally you can balance that out. So just communicating in that aspect is really nice.
When you do like with your multiple rooms or people in the same room, do people use like their lens cap or something to just cover it while the other person paints, or is there a technique for that?
So like for example, all right, so let's use my hands here. So if we have person A and person B and they're shooting this direction, right? Light might be spilled from person A over to person B. So we might just, say, cool, person A is going to shoot. They say end exposure, cool, person B, we're going to shoot end exposure. And you'll generally go back and forth like that when you're doing stuff. Otherwise, you can, if you want to check the shot before, or you need, somebody needs to look, then you can do a lens cap, or I will often use a beanie instead because that's less apt to move the camera than putting a lens cap on because it's just like harder. And a beanie you can just kind of gently place on. But that's generally how it would work.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. So first off, your first light painting tool can just be a flashlight. You don't actually need anything else other than that. In order to light paint this, I did have three strobes with a reflector to light her, but to do the light painting behind her, I was shooting at like f11, f13. And so I was banking on how I angled the flashlight into the camera lens to create the starburst effect. So as you can see, when I start on her right, our left, as I go up, you can see that it gets brighter because as I'm going up, I'm angling it down. So that way it's continuing to get into the camera and keeping it as even as I can. And so that's how you can get starburst like that. And I was turning the flashlight on and off manually in order to do so. Now we're gonna get into tubes and I'm gonna show you what they look like before we get any further. So I'm gonna stop sharing real quick here. And so this is a tube. You can get these from Home Depot. They're called T8 fluorescent safety tubes. They run like $4 a piece, pretty cheap. And inside of this one specifically is holographic paper, but you can put a lot of things in there. I will often use baking paper and then like a really long gel if you want to color. Otherwise, baking paper if you just want a white tube. And you just put a flashlight in the end. And then also a lot of the time we'll use, for a cheap solution, we'll just use toilet paper at the end to stop it from the light from coming out, and then it just creates a nice hot end at the end of it, which can look really good. So the first thing that we have is a circle, and let me get back to it. So there's a lot of different shapes that you can do. A circle is probably the most common shape, and you do it by holding the tube down with your thumb down, like you're giving a thumb down to someone, like, no. And then you literally just do a rotate with your hand, or rather with your wrist. It's not an arm rotation. It is a wrist rotation. That's something really common that people get incorrect, is they want to use their arm. And if you want a clean circle, you do a wrist rotation. You can see it looks perfect. I can promise you I've never done a perfect circle. The reason it looks perfect is our beginning and end start behind at her feet. And that's why we do that, so that it looks perfect even though it's not. And that's why having a long dress is really useful, because it hides the imperfection. So a door is another shape, and generally you can see it's not even here. I was probably using one hand, but doors work best when you use two hands and you're holding both ends and you bring it down. It's just hard to keep it straight with one hand. You just angle up, and it's hard to keep it straight. We also have what I call the Christmas tree. A lot of these are just what I call them. That doesn't mean that they're correct. It's just what I call them. This I generally start from the ground and go up, just because I find that easier. But you can go whichever direction works best for you. So for example, in this shot, I loved her body shape. It's one of my favorite poses when they do this. And I wanted the shape to complement the light shape to complement her body shape, and so that's why I did that version. So this is what I think is called the candle. That's what Eric Poiré calls it, and it's similar to the Christmas tree. I started from the bottom, went over, and then went up. These are called swipes. You start from, I start from my right, and I go at a 45-degree angle, and I bring it across my body again, and bring it down one more. Fans are similar, where I will start here and just kind of work my way down as I go down with the tube. And a lot of these are just stuff I've kind of come up with over time and just take practice like everything else. Ribbons, I struggle with a lot still. Eric Poiré is super good at ribbons. And this was one that I thought still came out pretty decent. So arches, I mean, you're going from one side of your body over to the other. Whichever side you want to work with works for you. I was on the back of this ladder. I do not recommend it. It was very sketch when she was up here. And so then I just kind of held up my arm and just kind of went over, and it ended up coming out pretty good. So now you just do a circle with flares. So, you'll do a circle, and then as that circle is finished, then you'll reset with your hands and then do a flare out, and then I turn off the flashlight, go to the other side and do another flare out. Another thing you can do, what's really cool, is you can play with reflections a lot of the time with light painting. Now, here's what's interesting is this was me running behind her, right? You can see these little swirls on the bottom below the light painting is my hand, which I thought was really fun, and it added a unique effect to it. And I was very blind. When you have a tube that does not have a back to it, you're just freaking blind when you're running. So blind. I'm like, I can't see anything. Don't recommend it. But here's what's interesting is most of the time in a long exposure, the water would become milky, right? You would see the motion blurred. But because it's a long exposure in the dark and the tube is only lighting the water at a certain point, it freezes the water movement, which I think is fascinating. And I did not expect that to happen. So some examples is we've done a lot with just a constant light. And now we are doing stuff with the strobe. So this is one flashlight on strobe, and you can see it creates those even gaps. And that's why having a constant strobe is really, really nice, because you can get that effect. And now, if you have two flashlights in the same tube, one constant, one on strobe, you can get this effect where it kind of just creates almost like a sun pattern, which I think looks really, really cool. The downside is that it does make one side of the flashlight very heavy when you're trying to make it. So either use two hands or find a way to just spin for you. If you use the T12 tube with two flashlights, generally that's more sturdy, but most of the community shifted to T8. So here's what's interesting. So this is with the T12 tube. It's a much thicker tube than the T8. And if you wanted to create these kind of gaps in here, I literally use toilet paper rolls, paper towel rolls, because they're blocking the light in certain areas, and that's going to give you some stripes, which come out really nice. This is another example using that same tube. You can see how you can get vastly different looking shots with the same tool, depending on the shape you make. Same idea, but I'm just doing some swipes with it and turning the flashlight off in between each swipe. And then you have like rainbow spandex. Okay, so Zach Allen was the first one to use this. Look up rainbow spandex or get it from like your local craft store. And then, if you see these white lines, that are on the tube, that's actually Scotch tape, because I taped the rainbow spandex to the back of I want to say to the back of the tube. That sounds right. And it created those lines, which I think comes out really, really cool. And I loved how this came out so much. The most important thing when it comes to using this kind of rainbow spandex is that if you shoot it too high of an ISO or the flashlight's too bright, it will drown out the colors. So be careful of that. When I edited this, you could not see the rainbow effect. Once I brought down the highlights and increased the saturation, that's what allowed the colors to come out. And it's still like one of my favorite exposures when it comes to this. So holographic tubes, like the one I showed you earlier, it's just holographic paper in the tube. And this is the sugar tube that Eric Paul sells. This is probably my favorite tube. I use all the time. And just the colors that come out of it are really, really nice. And you can see at the bottom right, or our bottom right, you can see the kind of change in the color there. And that looks really cool. A black tube seems counterintuitive. You're like, why would I have a tube that you can't see with the light? Well, the point is it becomes like an extension of your arm. So what you would do is you would have a black tube, and then at the end you'd have like another like mini tube that you would put on top, and that's what the light would hit. And so it can allow you to create other different kinds of shapes that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So it's just kind of like really extending your arm, and that's the black tube can do some really cool things. This is another example with the black tube. And then you can do tube stacking, which is with a bunch of mini tubes put together. So if you want a bunch of different colors, like I have a red and then an orange here, then you can get different looks that way. Hold up, there's a chat thingy.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, a couple quick questions real quick. Susan Longer mentioned, she says, these are awesome images. Do you ever do abstracts without people?
Yeah, I've done abstracts before. I mean, they're good. What's her name? There is someone who I know who's really good at those. I believe her name's Andrea. She's really good at those. Sometimes I've done, can't think of it. You know, in yoga studios, and they have the thing, and it does like the circle thing. I can't think of what they're called, but I've done that too, where you hang the light and you have the camera on the bottom, and then you swing the light, and then it creates a shape. I've done that too with light painting, but
Like a spirograph.
spirograph. Thank you. I was like, what is it called? And so I've done that, but for the most part, it's not something I super enjoy. No, but you know, you can use all the same tools to do the same thing. I've used blades or tubes or whatever. It really kind of comes down to your own preference.
And one other question that I had real quick is on some of them that you have people in there and you're doing those and so forth, and the ones that you're illuminating, there you go. That's an example, right? Perfect. Are you using like off-camera flash in that to light the human, the person in there, as you're also doing the other part?
I will. I believe I'll go into whether I use studio or a light, and I'll show you the light that I use.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. So we're gonna get into tube caps. There's a couple different options. This picture is actually old now. I don't think you can get these anymore. I do have, I don't know if it's my bags in here. But I've seen silicone ones made. I've seen 3D printed ones made that Eric has made. The little slots in these allow you to put like feathers or sparklers and stuff on them. And really, otherwise you can just use Scotch tape on the end of the tube. Really kind of depends what you want to do, but it's nice to have this as an option. When you're doing light painting and you have different pyrotechnics that you want to add in, whether, you know, the rosy posies or ice fountains or whatever, you can get some really cool effects. This was with just a normal sparkler. I want to say it was a rosy posy, but I could be wrong. You can get these really cool flaring off effects. This is another example, and you can see how the wind really adds to what you're doing here. And that can really make, well, it just can add so much to a photo if it's windy. In the wind, your models, the hair is going to be moving, a lot of things are going to be moving, so you want to try to do stuff that's quick so you can still get a clean image. So we're talking lighters, okay? A huge issue in the wind is lighting a sparkler, okay? Trying to light something in the wind, very difficult because it just blows the freaking flame out and you're trying to cover it and do that, and then you light it and then you get sparklers on your hand. It's not a good time. So to solve that, we have what's called an arc lighter, okay? You can get these off of Amazon for like 15, 20 bucks. And what's cool about these is you can recharge them, and it's all electricity. And so electricity can't be blown out. And so like that's so freaking nice that to be able to do that. So you don't have to deal with the freaking wind anymore. This is an example with a tube and then a rainbow tube on top. And I really love just like this combo. It looks really, really nice. And now this is, if you want to save anything, this is from Eric Pare and the settings that he uses when he's doing stuff outside, which is insane to me. You can see at the bottom here, it's like 6:15 and then it goes to 6:22 and he's already changed his settings. And like 5 minutes later, he's changing them again because he knows specifically what he's looking for as the light changes, which is crazy to me because he'll just like switch to these things. And this is just a general idea, but he just knows. And you can see examples at the top here and like how we adjust stuff when we're, when it's really nighttime. He has a lower luminosity on his flashlight and a higher ISO and a really low f-stop. And he's changing from, warmer to cooler when it comes to everything else, white balance. And it's just like super, super useful. I highly recommend this as a guide to anyone. So we're going to get into now kind of how you light your model through different ways. So this specifically was with the ambient light with the tube. A lot of Eric's stuff is just all with the ambient light with the tube and you exposing correctly. I've never been amazing at that. And here I used the lights and the walls to help light my subject to make that easier. And now here I used what's called the Light Painting Brushes Portrait Light. And it's this little like bar that you put a flashlight into and you can use that to light your subject. And this was like a perfect lighting for me because the blade itself is what lit up the room and really kind of gave the room definition. And then I just lit her evenly with the portrait light. And in this example, I did shoot it at like a higher f-stop, like f8, to make this work because of all the bounce light. But you can see me using it here. And that's basically how you use it. It's really up to you if you want to kind of be more creative with it. And if you want to light your environment, you can get some really nice shots that way too. This is what it looks like. It's a little bit expensive, but I mean, I freaking love it, especially when you're traveling or if you're going out somewhere remote and you don't want to have to carry a strobe and do all that. Like this is a great option. So you can also use soft boxes. I use two, just like, like the Cowboy Studio setup you can get from Amazon for like $100. That's what I use for these. Like you don't need expensive lights to do it. To make this, I use some blades and just some gels around it. And then for this is actually with L-wire, which we'll get to. And I used a high ISO for that. This is with the strobe off to the side. And obviously with the strobe, you can get further away and hit it with more power. So those are like the main ways that you light. A big question people will ask me is, do you use rear curtain sync or front curtain sync when you want to, expose for your person on the light painting? And the answer is, it's up to you. For the most part, unless you're doing shutter drag, I like to use rear curtain. I like to strobe at the end, but it's really up to you on which you prefer. The universal connector is really, really nice. It allows you to basically either make a lot of tools yourself, whether you want to make them out of Sprite bottles with tinsel or other things, and you can just attach a bunch of different makeshift tools together and use this to hold your flashlight. These are some blades from Light Painting Brushes. This is one option. I believe the blades run around 40 a piece, which is, decent. You could also just make your own plexiglass. There's definitely tutorials how to do that. And if you're on a budget, then, go for these over Anson Melon because you can get, these still do a really good job. The only downside is if you drop them, they will break. They break pretty easily, so just be aware of that. This is an example using the feather blade with the Light Painting Brushes. Making a shape like this takes some practice because you really have to visualize how you're moving and being consistent, because I will go along the same path that I go out with and come back in. And as I take the bigger wings at the top, I will step further out and bring it back in. And as I get closer in, I'll take not as large steps out in order to make the wings. This is another example, but going in an up direction. And they take around 20 to 15 seconds to make these. And this one was like a lot longer just because I wanted to see how big can we make this. Butterfly wings are I never really got a good image with these. This was just me messing around. But for the top, it's pretty straightforward. You just kind of go back and forth. And then the bottom, it's almost like you're stabbing the ground a little bit. And you can see here my foot, I think it was some jeans and a tennis shoe right here when I made this. So I was not being super aware because of the light that was hitting the back over here. This is an example by Jason Page where he would turn the flashlight on and off to create these wings. And that would take so long to do. So mad props to Jason Page for making this. So this is another option. So now we're going to get into crowns. I was obsessed with crowns for a long time. These are some basic crowns. The one on the right is when you have a flashlight on strobe. And the one on the left is when you're turning the flashlight on and off to get that effect. Now you can also do double crowns where these are both either on strobe or like a pulse of sorts, where you would make one circle and then you would just go down a little bit further down the back and make a second circle. You kind of treat these the same way you would tubes, where you use the person's body as kind of your anchor, where you start and end. And this was using the ants on a melon flashlight. And then we have stuff like expanding crowns. Jason Page showed me this one. Just kind of like make it kind of envelop your portrait, which I think is really cool. I call these spatial headdresses. It's basically just when you're creating separate layers and creating these different looks. I will on the one on the left, I'll never be able to make something that even again. I don't know how I did that. It looks so freaking clean. It was like I think it was a minute, and she like stood so still. So this was by Dan Roberts, and when you can do a lot of different stuff with this. The most important thing is when you're writing, you have to write backwards. If you're facing the camera, if you're facing away from camera, you can write normally. Otherwise, if you're facing towards the camera, it will reverse it. So if you're just writing it facing away from the camera, then just make sure you're not blocking the lighting with your body. Mass Street Art is probably the best light calligraphist I've ever seen. He has some specialized tools to create these Arabic looking shapes, which are freaking amazing. And then you can see here that he used a flashlight to do some graffiti writing on a wall. And that's Dan, like that's his name. And I'm like, that's crazy to me. It looks so cool. This is another example of what he did. I believe he used an Olympus for this, but you can just see like how precise you can be when writing when he did the whole alphabet, which looks incredible. So now we're back to this image. The original idea came from Eric Paré because I saw him do like a BTS thing, and I was like, oh, "That's a brilliant idea! I have to do this." And so you just get a dowel. I wrapped it in gaff tape, and then I gaff taped a light painting brush's feather blade and the flashlight to the end of it. And then basically you would just start with your hand closer to the blade, and you would make a circle, and then you would just drop it down a little bit and make another circle. This was around a 20-second exposure with a wide angle lens, 24-70. And this was done with the full moon. So that's how the whole environment is lit up like that, and why there's not a lot of star trails, because we did it with a wide angle, and it was at 20 seconds. And that's how that was exposed for. I alluded this earlier. When I made this, you have a light painting brush's blade, just so normal flashlight. Then you have what I call stingy gels. A lot of gels that we're familiar with can bend really easily. These ones are a lot stiffer, and so you can just kind of hold on to them with your hand and kind of move around, and you can get those alternating colors that way. This is similar, but you can get some iridescent basket wrap. You can just Google this. I have a big roll, and you can get these really colorful rainbow effects around the blade. This is another example. And another thing you can do is you can use either shrinky dinks, and you will color them and then put them in the oven, and then that can change your color of your flashlight, or you put it inside the blade. Washable markers, different color changes, or alcoholic inks, they all work. For this one, I used alcoholic inks to get the color effect. And of course, you can also just like combine the tools. You don't have to use just tubes or just blades or whatever. You can try different things to get different effects. The light whips here are really, really awesome. Again, Dan Roberts turned me on to this company, Ants on a Melon. And you can see here on the right, this light whip, you can see how the environment on the rocks is lit very like particularly, like there's a shadow over here, but it's nicely lit over here. That's because I use the portrait light from light painting brushes to really kind of paint my environment how I wanted it to come out. And I was super happy with how that came out. This is with fiber optics. There's a lot of different examples with fiber optics. This was with, I want to say the color shine flashlight, and I had a camera on the ceiling, and I used the app to trigger it. And so then we would color the blue, would light her, and then in the dark, she would roll over and then go to the other side, and then I would light her again, and that's how we got this double exposure of this person, all in one shot, because I have a Sony, and you can't do multiple exposures. If it hasn't already been said, because I don't think I said it, just assume everything's in camera, because I don't know how to use Photoshop. So these are black fiber optics. This was with jamming some gels into a fiber optic, and then this was using the ants on a melon black fiber optic. The biggest difference between the black and white is that the only light that comes out of black fiber optics is at the tips. So you can really kind of direct, and that's how you can really get these stringy looking effects. This is with white fiber optics. You can see here, this was definitely with the color shine. You can see that it can really see the motion, but you can also get some detailed stuff if you want to light your subject, or if you're using, you know, I think this is with the ants on a melon and the white fiber optics, and then like a prism to get that effect. There's also colored fiber optics if you want to do blue, green, or magenta, and that's how you can get like a white look like a black fiber optic, but then blue everything else. And this is an example with the pink. So Maria Sagede from Italy, she likes to shoot at a lot of like f11. And use fiber optics, and you can get some gorgeous looking silhouettes with it. Okay, so these are insane. I have never mastered these, but Warren Adrian Tang is absolutely incredible when it comes to fiber optic wings. He will use an Olympus camera to kind of track his progress. And I've often used my Olympus and tied it into a monitor like a TV, so I can see myself create in real time and try to match it up. But the way his technique is it's just absolutely incredible what he comes out with. Like, it just blows me away. If I could do this, I would do so many images like that. So this is El Wire. You can pick this up off Amazon really easy. You probably can get like 10 different ones for like 20 bucks. They all take like AAAs or AA's, but this is how you can get that smoky effect. And depending on your ISO, like these are at 1,000, I believe. But if you go higher, it creates more like almost a graffiti effect, I want to say, instead of a smoke effect. But it's a really cool tool to use if you want some fake smoke. So surprisingly, you can use an iridescent makeup bag, I think. So like I got this makeup bag from H&M, and you just put a flashlight in it, and you just wave it around, and that's how you can get that look. Generally, a higher f-step is going to be better because you don't want it to get blown out. You can also use like a rainbow bag or like a rainbow plate you can get from the dollar store, and then you just kind of shine the flashlight on it as you move it around. And then you have the Maggie light. The Maggie light's been around for a little while now, for at least like 5 years, when light painting was bigger than it is now, I think. But you can program, basically it's an LED strip that has a diffuser on top. You can choose a lot of different colors, but it just looks so even and it looks really nice. Here's another example with a gradient that you can get out of it. And then you can also do like wings or any kind of PNG that you want to make. And it will basically, because it's a straight line of pixels, you can choose how it goes across an image, whether it's forward or back, and the speed at which that goes, and how you can make like wings like this. And you can also program in your own images. Like I just did some Pokemon here that were really fun. They do run around for $300. They're better than the Pixel Stick. Pixel Stick is like 6 feet long. Not worth it. If you're doing like cars or something, it can be a really useful tool. This was with Visual Poi. It's similar to the Maggie Light where you can program stuff in it. I think it's also like 300 bucks. So I would be hesitant to use it, but you can get some good stuff out of it. Like this rainbow effect is really, really nice. And I've done a lot of stuff with like, brands or whatever. You can just program all that stuff in. So yeah, $300. You can see I did this for Jubilee for kind of fun. But you can see you can get very specific with what you want to make. A lot of tools that people have seen, and I know this is just a lot of tools, is the Yangyo YN 360. And you can find this, or like the Savage light wands. You can get these. And they're okay. They're not my favorite. I find them hard to control. Like my friend Kirk Edwards, however, is really, really good with using these. So I recommend checking him out. So yeah, $120. They might be cheaper now, but it's kind of up to you if you want to use those or not. And then just for funsies, because I'm telling you, I did like that with this. This was held. But then to get this kind of crazy refraction effect, we actually held up a water bottle to a laser. And that's what created this effect, because it split the laser. You also have nanlite tubes. Okay, so nanlite tubes, they're really cool, they're really heavy, and they're really expensive. But you can get really nice effects like this. They're really unruly. They're hard to make work right. But yeah, you can make cool effects like this. You can also do stuff with fire. You can't really do stuff with fire in Colorado. So, if you're going to do it anyway, do it in a safe spot. But literally just a wooden towel, a cotton t-shirt, and a stapler. And that's what I use. It is, very rudimentary. A lot of rules when it comes to fire stuff. We don't have to go over all of it, but just be really, really intentional. Fire is dangerous. Be really smart with it. Make sure your model doesn't have stuff in their hair. Make sure they wear natural clothing, nothing synthetic. Just a lot of this stuff. Yeah. If you're going to get into fire, just talk to me first. We'll make sure you're safe. Here are some examples. It looks so cool. I never get over it. It looks so good. You have to shoot at a high f-stop in order to get these. Otherwise, they get blown out. Especially when you first ignite a fire. It's going to be overexposed. Having someone behind the camera actually to adjust your f-stop as the fire dies would be ideal. So just keep that in mind. And here's another example doing like a fire dragon technique that I invented. Some just more fire examples of different ways that you can use it because it's pretty. So we also have steel wool. Everybody's pretty common with steel wool if you've been into light painting before. A whisk, some rope, and a grade quadruple zero steel wool. You just stuff that steel wool in the whisk, light it on fire, and spin it around. And this is like with that 360 camera. And you get some really cool looking effects with it. So with 360 cameras, you can control by the phone, at least. And this was from a minute ago. I like the original Insta360. So it might have gotten better. I don't think you can edit the RAWs in Photoshop, which sucks. So I had to edit a JPEG. And they can be pretty expensive. But, it is something that you can do if you want specific effects. So when it comes to model clothing, it depends on your situation a lot of time. A lot of time, if you're doing tube work, then you want, something that hangs down really low so it covers the feet and the beginning of the circle. If you're only using ambient light, so like light from your light painting tool, then you want to use white or black clothing. And the reason being is a lot of the time your tool or ambient light will color the clothing. So if you have like green or yellow, that ambient light's going to then change the color of that clothing and it might not look pretty. So that's why we prefer white or black. And honestly, basic dresses work fine. I just got a whole bunch of rayon that we freaking not paperclip, but clothespin to the waist and just like a black tank top. You don't need anything crazy. It's really, really easy. That's what I used in this photo. Is just some rayon and she had a black tank top on. Other stuff is we like parachute dresses. So I had a bunch of loom cubes underneath the dress that I would trigger on and off with my phone. And then I would do a light painting behind her. And yeah, that's how that happened. When it comes to light painters, generally just black clothing. We're trying to not be seen by the camera. So unless you're on a cyc wall, with the exception of a cyc wall, you generally want to be black. If you're using a cyc wall, try white. I find that, at least for me, the black shows up more. So So just some modeling tips, like the camera sees everything. If you move even a little bit, the camera's going to see it if you're exposed, okay? I promise you say I didn't move. Well, you did. I don't know how the camera doesn't lie, okay? And that's only when the light is exposing you. If the light's not being exposed, you can move all you want. It's just if there's light on you. Right before the exposure happens, you want to start your inhale if you're a model, and then hold your breath. And then if the exposure is short, if not, then you can kind of slowly exhale. Basically, if anything is longer than 2 seconds, don't choose a pose with your body that's like arms extended out everywhere. Because like if you try to hold out your arms or your legs and you try not to move, I'm trying not to move my arms right now and they're moving. Okay. So like, don't choose something that you're going to move because we're going to see it. And then just choose a solid stance, like don't try to be on one leg unless you're really, really good at that stuff. Like if they're a contortionist or acrobat or something like that, they can do it. Okay. I've had it done. So we're going to get into prisms. Okay. You can find this on Amazon for $20. Pretty easy. You can get some cool effects with it. So like this, for example, was with the prism. Now here's what's interesting. If you just use the prism, okay, you're not going to be able to see her. She's going to be all prismified, okay? We don't want that, right? We want to see the subject. So what you do is first, you do the light painting. You put the prism over the camera lens, okay? You do the light painting. That's going to expose the camera. And I believe in this, we also exposed for the background at the same time. And then what you do is you remove the prism and then you use a strobe to light your subject. So you'll mix the two exposures. And if you do it right, then you'll be able to overcome the initial exposure with the prism and be able to have your subject not prismified. Okay. Here's another example using the same technique, but I used a lens baby to give it some extra lens stuff. Then we have kaleidoscopes. Okay. These are really, really cool. They're like prisms, but they're crazy. Generally, first surface glass is the best. It's different than normal glass. It's more fancy. Okay. Don't ask me what it means. I just know you want it. It only works for specific lens sizes because of the way that it's tapered at the end here. But you can remix your shot. So here's like a shot that I did when I was out in White Pocket with friends. And then my friend Dan used a kaleidoscope and he got this. And that looks real cool, right? It looks like fires all over the place. Okay. Pretty gnarly. Now we have holograms. Okay. They're similar to kaleidoscopes, not the same. I don't know why they're called holograms. It's just what they call them. It's what Johnny Griffin, who made them, calls them. You can get a lot of different effects with these. They're really, really cool. This is more abstract stuff. If you like the abstract things, here's an example. Like this is a photo. That's crazy to me. That looks so cool. And, that's just having something at the end of the hologram to create that effect. It looks so trippy. It looks 3D, and I freaking love it. Now we're going to get into the brocade technique. I learned this from Maria Sajida, who would use it for like more boudoir stuff. So this fabric you see here is not see-through, okay? It's as thick as the shirt that you're probably wearing right now. But this is brocade, and it's just a fabric, and it's shiny. And basically, you put it on top, you light them, whether with the strobe or with a flashlight. You take it off, and you light them again, and it mixes the two exposure into one shot. And so this works really well for like boudoir stuff, or if you just want to do like some cool, like sexy looking photos. Now we have, of course, double exposures. This is, pretty self-explanatory because again, I use a Sony. So we just had her step on one side, lit her, step her again on the other side, lit her again, and I just had the light in the same spot. So now we're going to get more into like shutter drag, long exposures with movement. So on the right, we had our dancer here. She moved from our right to our left, and we had this light on constant. Okay, this is a really strong constant light. You want like a really, really strong constant light for this. And she moved over, and as she moved over, then I had a strobe over here that went off and froze her in place, so she wasn't all shutter exposy, long exposure thingy. So you can really get that cool movement in there. Now we're gonna get into lasers. Okay. Common misconception with lasers. Lasers can be all over the place. Just don't let it hit the sensor of your camera, okay? Common misconception, it's fine. Just don't let it hit that sensor. This also applies to your eyes, so like don't be looking into lasers, guys. Your eyes are even better cameras, okay? Don't do that. A lot of the time we have what's called where a laser will need to terminate at a certain place. So like, don't be pointing lasers in the sky because it will go on forever. Just have it like hit a wall or something. Like you want to be responsible. Really strong lasers can burn through stuff, so be careful. And in this image, if the model wasn't blocking the laser, it would be hitting my lens. Okay, if the model wasn't blocking the laser. So here is a great example. Okay, when we're using lasers. And this is the Maggie light behind her with a fire effect. Okay, this is fake fire. Okay, we saw real fire earlier. Real fire looks way cooler. But if people don't know that this is fake fire, they think it's real. Now we have lasers coming down. Down lasers are easily my favorite for photography. And this white on the dress here made the dress look like it was on fire. But this is just the laser illuminating it. And then if you look at her hands here, we have two beams of these lasers coming down and hitting her hands. And then it's reflecting off of her hands to light her face, which is crazy to me. Like this, this is so probably one of my favorite photos I've ever taken. So this is another example of freaking Sony not having multiple exposure. And I had to do it in one shot, okay? It was a pain in the butt. It took me 7 hours to get it right. Okay, it took a long time. And basically, you start with a macro lens, you take a photo, and then you have a wide angle lens that you switch to. So you're switching how the sensor is exposing. And in that wide angle, you're basically putting a stencil on top of the lens. So you're only letting light in through the very center. And then you switch it to a different tripod. And then like for these, I had them go behind desk floor chair protectors that was held up by a C-stand. So they went up against it like it was glass. And then I light painted behind them with fiber optics to create this effect. And Tim Gamble is the one who I learned this from, and he's just the master of in-camera light painting. Spirographs, like we talked about earlier. My friend Aaron's super good at these. He's done a whole bunch, whether with like a really simple light or with blades or other things. You can get some crazy looking effects with those, and they look really, really good. Here's some examples that Aaron did with blades, and I think they almost look like sea creatures. They look so cool. So there's a lot that you can do with spirographs. Another example of a spirograph is where I combine it with a portrait, where I had it swinging up top here, and I combined it with a portrait of someone. You can also combine gels with light painting. So if you want to kind of, create this kind of effect, you can do that. This, I just use a rectangle blade with a pink color changer on it. And I just kind of did a spiral out. And I just had a 3 light setup with different gels, pink, blue, pink, to create that effect. And I did use front curtain sync for this. The reason I used front curtain sync for this is I wanted to hit her first and then go behind with the light painting image and then just end the exposure instead of me having to step out and then hit it with the flash because I don't want to be in it. So this way it's just faster if I do it this way for me. So now you can also, of course, get into stop motion if you want to do light painting video with not doing video. So basically you kind of come with a pattern of what you want beforehand. And then we kind of move between each shot with the model here. And tubes are really nice and easy for this. You can do other stuff, but it's more complicated. So here's some examples of with the tube again and with blades. Just some other concepts that are kind of fun if you want to play with photography in that aspect. You can also do video light painting. This was using Eric Paul Ray's virtual ink. And it's pretty freaking cool because you can put up 2 cameras with the same body and lenses, and one can capture the ambient light and the other can capture the light painting. If you want to like do stuff with ambient light and still capture stuff being moving around and seeing yourself, then you can use this. I do believe it changed the pricing and such, but it's something else you can look into. You can also do it with Adobe After Effects, though the echo effect does take forever to render, so I don't necessarily recommend it, but it is an option. All right, so now we're gonna get into drones. If you're using your drone as a top down, so most drones can only do up to 4 seconds long exposure, but you can get some really, really cool effects with these. On the image on the right, I basically was waving to tubes like in an X pattern formation. Wait, actually, no, that wasn't true. I was going them side by side on my arms, and I just kind of walked over her to get that effect, and I had somebody man the drone and click the shutter when I asked them to. You saw some stuff that I did top down earlier. I used a platypod to do this. They're pretty inexpensive if you want to hang stuff from the ceiling or you don't have a tripod. And I just kind of like hung it from the rafters. And it feels a little sketch, but as long as you got some nails in the rafters, you'll be all right. And that's how I made, like, again, something like this. This was using the Ants on a Melon orb tool. And this, I just love how this one came out. So another thing you can do is you can do focus pulls. And focus pulls are really, really cool for fireworks. This is an example I did a few years ago, and it looks like a sea anemone almost from the firework. I did some more this year. I highly recommend them if you're shooting fireworks and you really want your stuff to shoot to be different from everyone else. Do some focus pulls. If you want to do a landscape shot and get that landscape shot that's clean, and then do focus pulls, and you want to like composite those in later, they look pretty fire. I never see people do that. You really stand out. I think those are freaking rad. Any hoops. We also have zoom pulls. Zoom pulls are really, really cool. You can see here where I zoomed away, I want to say. Zoomed in, one of the two. So you start with your exposure, you light them, and you kind of just do a zoom pull. Whether you do it forward or back, and you can see these trailing lights or that shadow effect. Really, really cool effect. I don't use it often enough. I think it's really dope. And lastly, we kind of get into how you can use this sort of stuff. It's super fun. It's really going to challenge your technical skills. Like, you will become a master of exposure if you get into light painting and really want to understand how light works. It's really good to add at the end of a session. If you're light painting, if you're doing a portrait session, you want to add something like fun and special. It's something you can upsell. It's really good for just different portraits or aerialists, pole dancers, athletes, any of that. Different techniques for all of those, but they can all work. And then if you do drone light painting for clients, you will need a license, a Part 107, and I can show you guys some examples of that. Do I have them in here in this presentation? I don't think so, which is fine. But there's a lot of stuff that you can do with drone light painting as well, and to program your own stuff with that. So I'm going to kind of open it up to questions now. So if you have any kind of questions on how stuff is done, or things that I've tried or not tried or whatever, holla at your boy.
Very good, Russell.
Yeah. So like in a lot of the settings that I'll have a question. A lot of the settings where you're doing these and that, how dark it, let's say like that example that you have right up there, and that the room itself without doing all of your lights and so forth, how dark is that room, or how dark are most of those environments that you're in when you're
okay, cool.
doing this kind of thing?
This was during the day. We had to like shutter a bunch of stuff, so you could still see pretty well with your naked eye. This was probably shot at a higher f-stop. Man, it's hard to remember because when you're using a tool like a light whip like this, it's really dim because it has to go through so much of the rope. So I mean, this was probably shot at a higher ISO, but I just really wanted the flashlights to come through. I definitely used double flashlights to illuminate that. So it's hard to know your settings, right? Because it comes down to 4 things: your ambient light, what you're doing. So that's going to affect your ISO as well as your f-stop, the brightness of your flashlight, and having to adjust for that, because that's where a lot of your adjusting is going to be, is how bright your flashlight is. And then lastly, how long is your exposure going to be? Because that's also going to affect what settings I need to choose depending on my environment. So it's always variable. There's no set it and forget it setting. I will often start at like ISO 100 f2.8, and then because I always use bulb, but really I'll kind of adjust from there. So if we're talking, this image, I would have probably been at a higher f-stop because of the light coming in. But like for like these ones, I was probably at ISO 100 f2.8 because it was pretty dark. These were really dark, so I'm always generally at a low ISO 2.8. Let's see. This was one of the right was at like, I want to say it was like at f8, ISO 100. But yeah, like it's honestly so variable depending on what you're doing.
Thank you. That helps. It sounds like, and a lot of this just comes with like experience and knowing and what under certain lighting circumstances, whether it's the ambient, what light modifiers you're using, what tools you're using, and so forth, what all of those, like you say, everything is going to be variable, but with experience comes being able to master it like that.
Yeah, and you'll get used to it. Most of the time when I light paint now, like I can say if I'm leading a workshop, I'll say these are the settings that you're gonna want, and 9 times out of 10, I'm always right because I'm so used to understanding exposure that I just know what the settings need to be, and I don't need to test.
Right. Thank you.
So Russell, in general, to get better color, it's better to have a lower lumen on your flashlight and higher ISO, or
Yeah, generally lower lumen is going to be what's best because a white flashlight specifically can overpower anything colored, whether it's like a gel or any kind of like rainbow fabric or anything like that you have that you're playing with. The white just blows it out. So if you can shoot with a lower lumen in your flashlight and then use your camera settings to adjust to try to find that middle ground, that's going to be your best bet.
Russell, I looked at some of your websites that you had listed on there, and that one, with the calligraphy tools, there was a lot of tutorials on that. That was very helpful.
Yeah, let me see if it's going to load for me. There we go. So on my website, I created the Ultimate Light Painting Guide because there wasn't really one out there. So basically, everything I know how to do is on this page. I made a drop down for everything I know with different lights, different things. And if you want to go to tubes, I give you a tutorial on how to make your own tubes. And you can just really just scroll through here and use the anchors and everything I have set up on different things so you can learn how to make stuff. It's just one of those things that I'm like, why not? So you have questions, you can just go to here. There's so much info, lots of different resources for other light painters. If you got questions, check here.
What's the website? The website is.
Yeah, I put it for those that were on Zoom. I put it in there earlier in that, but it's was it www or it's lightandlens.com, lighthandlense.com, right?
Yep.
Do you do any similar stuff with smaller objects, or is everything kind of human size and larger? It looks like most of your things with models as opposed to.
Yeah, hold on. Let me see if I can find some I did forever ago. Because I've done stuff with product before. Here are some examples I did with the Heineken bottle a while ago. I don't remember what tool I used for that, or like using fiber optics to create this kind of effect as well. Let's see here what else I have that you can choose from. But honestly, having a tube, some blades, and fiber optics, like those are the main three that I would go for.
on that last picture that you ended with the girl in the room.
So that is with a custom tool that I made.
How many
this
times did it take you to get to that shot?
thick fiber optic. If you look like really thick fiber optic on Amazon, you can find it. And then I just used 2 PVC. I used just like a coupler and like a tube sort of thing, and I put them together. And then I just drilled a hole, and then I put the flashlight on both sides, and that's how I could create this look, this effect.
And how many times did you do that shot to get to this one that you're showing?
Not a lot. Let's see, that would have been 2021. That would have been in March, I believe. 2021, 2022. Because that was in France. So we did a bunch of stuff. That was like on the last day, I want to say. Looks like I only did 3 shots. So like this was like a test with one.
You mentioned at the beginning that you could shoot all night and then not come away with anything that you liked.
Yeah, it's possible. I've had it happen before where I wasn't happy with anything. And that's, is what it is. Sometimes you don't. And that's okay. I've had it happen a few times. It really kind of depends on the person. But I mean, like, you can make anything work. Like, I was at WPPI this past year, and like, I'm in a hotel. This is in just a hotel floor, right? Just in a room somewhere. And I just use a tube and I lit her by hand. And I'm like, that looks amazing, right? You don't need crazy tools to make dope stuff. This is just with a gel. Oh, this is just an orange gel. That's it. Right? And then same thing, but I just did it once on constant, another on stroke. Just in like a hotel. Like you don't need anything crazy. Same here with blades, right?
I like the fireworks part. Never thought about doing that with.
Yeah. It's it can be a little sketch sometimes, but you know, I definitely had it where like the sparkler, because I didn't do it right, would hit the dress and it like burned holes in the dress, and I'm like, oh, that's a problem. So you know, something to be aware of. But yeah, so that's kind of a lot of it. You can do it. You can do stuff with cars. I've done stuff with cars too. Comes out all right. If you really want to get, I'm trying to remember who does. There's one guy who's really good at cars. There's a Colorado light painting car group on Facebook you guys can check out. They're really good. A lot of that comes down with compositing though, and being able to composite a shot together really well. So if that's something you're into, you can do that. Some other options for like I've done stuff with like drones and stuff. Like this is when I first started out doing like the Iron Man sign or like Pikachu or whatever, right? There's so much that you can do if you want to do drone stuff, and eventually you can do like animations and all sorts of stuff with drones. And that's that's if you have one. It's an expensive thing to have to use for something that's very not the norm. Okay, you know. But yeah, so like that's another option. I have a bunch of tutorials on YouTube on how to do this stuff.
Hey, Russell, on the drone stuff, have you found different lights you can use, or use anything different other than just a white light that's on constantly?
So what I use is the LumeCube strobe, which is a horrible. It's not a good name. It's a misnomer, really. It's super lightweight. It's lighter than LumeCubes are. I think it's like 0.5 grams or something. It's super light, and I just stick that on the back of the drone, and I use that to draw with. Let me see if I have drone sky painting. Is there a vertical? Because all the ones that I just showed you were horizontal, but a lot of the stuff I do now is all vertical light paintings because it's just cleaner. I don't have to make it as big. Drone sky painting. Here we go. So this will work. I did something for PUBG, which is a video game. So you can see here, like this is all vertical. And there's like, so there's certain things that'll work, some things that won't. Like here's a face that you did vertical, right? There's a lot that you can do, and it really kind of depends what you want to do. If you want to like throw in different colors, you can do that. This was shooting it like straight up basically, but I wanted to have like the stars and the rotation in it. So there's a lot of different options for what you want to do. If I can find, let's see, drone sky painting, is there a stop motion animation section? Shape rotation, no. Stop motion, here we go. And then you can do, if you just put a bunch together. Oh gosh, there's music. I don't need that. You can see here. No, come on, get out of here. All right. So I just put a bunch of them together. And then for any place where the lines would like not work when it's going other places, I would Photoshop those out. But you can make all sorts of animations that way. Like the hardest one I did where I had it like running across the sky, which was a pain in the butt. There was a lot of planning that had to go into that. But yeah, so there's a lot of different things that you can kind of do depending on what you want to create. Your biggest hurdle is going to be battery life.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Russell. It's awesome. And I see we have a high set of standards upcoming contest.
October 2nd, light painting that.
Yeah, guys, you gotta get good real quick. All right.
No, this was great. Thank you for doing that. And if only you had a little bit more enthusiasm, so we really know that you really enjoyed doing this stuff.
Yeah.
No, this was fantastic. It's so much creativity in that. As Bruce pointed out, it's a matter of trying to figure out where to start and how to create some of those things. But the examples you brought forward in the program tonight are amazing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like if you're going to start with anything, just get a flashlight and get a tube. Like I started with tubes. That's what I focused on for like 3 months, was just understanding shapes and really getting into that. I was literally in the front yard in my parents' house, and we were practicing shapes, and just like at night, cars are driving by thinking we're doing some kind of like ritual, which is waving lightsabers around. So yeah, that's what I would start with. If I'd start with anything, just because tubes are easily accessible from a Home Depot or Lowe's.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll have to set up a group outing or something like that and go try and do some stuff.
Yeah, we'll have this, once I edit it down, we'll probably have it out on YouTube, and I'll send you a link to it. Russ,
Okay.
you can share it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you again. Thank you. This has been
Yeah,
great.
of course. I hope you guys learned something. There's going to be a lot of at PPC, whatever the event that we do in Colorado is called that I forget. Yeah, there'll be a lot of AI stuff. A lot of that's going to be related to how you can like animate your photos if you want to use AI and augmented reality to kind of like make it an interactive piece that you can use to really kind of, it just makes it more fun. You just use QR codes, can tag it onto your website or whatever. As well as other tools like Runway. They have the ability now with Runway. So say you have an image, and it's an image of a woman and her hair is like blowing in the air, right? In a still image, right, you can see, oh, the wind was moving. But with the Runway like in paintbrush, you can actually have it animate the hair and keep it moving like it's a cinematograph. So like that's another thing that we'll go over. We'll go over different things on how to train a model of people, or like how to edit or like change clothing and stuff like that. So it's going to be a lot of things as the AI space continues to change. And the other thing that's to kind of look out for is now that I have a camera that can do multiple exposure, is there's a lot of things that you can do with stencils. Okay, so this is a picture frame. I have the stencil in here. And then what you can do is normally in a multiple exposure, right? Like, what we've seen is part of your exposure, like say you have somebody on a softbox and you make a silhouette, and then you can multiple exposure into that silhouette, right? You can make it plants or whatever. So when you're using a frame like this, and then you have the inverse of this, is you can expose and create some really cool effects in camera, as long as this frame is between your subject and the camera. So that's like another thing that you can really, really play with. And you get some crazy results that way in camera that otherwise people would assume you do in Photoshop, but we don't know how to use that. So we do it in camera, okay?
Sounds good.
Great.
Okay, well, unless there's any other questions, I think we'll call it
Okay.
a night.
Yeah, great. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thanks again, Russell.
Yeah. And thank you everybody for showing up tonight. We learned a lot tonight. Overwhelming at points, but a lot of great techniques and things to experiment with.
And there's always the guide, so you can always reference that.
There you go.
That's right.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well,
Great. Thanks for sharing that too.
Cool.
Thanks, Russell. Have a good night.
Thank you guys.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.